What is up, chat? Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on Redundant Reincarnation, Volume 2, Part 5, and we're getting our Hot Springs episode. Yes, after 26 volumes and 2 side volumes, we're finally getting the fated Hot Springs episode. We got a beach episode at some point finally, which is surprising it took that long. But again, to the lore of the world, you don't just go jumping into the beach. I know Refugin put some horrible stipulation there to keep us from having a beach episode, but now we're getting the Hot Springs episode. And unfortunately, like I mentioned before, not everybody's there like you're supposed to, Refugin. With anime logic, everybody's there. Everybody just magically shows up. Orsted shows up. We don't get Orsted in some like hot like swimming trunks or something like that. Orsted doesn't get involved. But anyways, that aside. But yes, these next few chapters are amazing. I get a lot of insight into characters that I thought I would never get insights into. Talhan. We're finally getting to Gino. We're finally gonna find out what the hell happened with Gino. Like, how did this dude just show up out of nowhere and he's OP? That stuff we're getting into. I'm not sure exactly how much we'll get into. It just depends on how much I dig into, especially Talhand. That stuff is gonna be super juicy for me because I've been really, really anticipating Talhand stuff. But we'll see, as per usual. We'll see how far we get, how much it records. But yes, before we get into that though, thank you guys so much for your support, your kind words, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. All the comments that I've been looking at lately, it's been lifting me back up. For those that don't know, some crazy stuff happened over the last 2 weeks. I had this big, massive harassment campaign going on me, so it was nice to see all the support. You guys are just absolutely amazing. It means a great deal to me. But yes, as always, I greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Last week, we had Spud Monkey with 12 months. Hit that 1 year mark. Thank you so much for your long-time support. Royce Moith, as usual, throwing in that super. Thank you so much, Royce Moith. Sub with a super. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Noah. Again, another one. Always jumping in there. Thank you so much, Noah, for your support. But that said, let's just jump into it. Let's get into Chapter 5, Hot Springs. The Hot Springs episode. Ding, ding, ding. Wow. No trip to the mountains were complete without a dip in the hot springs. Rudius and party headed to the inn town, carving out a path through the throng of beast folks who swamped them at the sight of Leo. Well, he did howl. I was joking about that before, but he technically howled, and that probably triggered them all. Like, he's here. Just the ears twitch. After taking a tour of the town, they met with Talhan the dwarf, whom Rudius had asked them to be their guide. That night, once the kids were in bed, they headed to a tavern for an adults-only shindig. They stayed there for one night, then headed out early the next morning, with Talhan leading the way to the hot springs. How in the world do you get away from the kids for an adult-only outing? Like, who stayed with them? I guess Aisha or something. Aisha's an adult. She could be with the shindig. Reese heard that monsters appeared in the hot springs, but they were closer to the town than he expected. What looked like a natural valley, that beautiful, milky white water had bubbled up to fill, was actually the hot spring, hemmed in by a wall built to keep the monsters out. Looking back the way that he had climbed, they could see the town far below. The bath itself was spectacular, open air, and allowed mixed bathing. There weren't many people, and no other humans. Almost everyone that Rudius glimpsed was dwarf, halfling, or some sort of beast. Hot spring culture wasn't a thing for humans and elves. In the case of humans, only nobles ever bathed in hot water, so it was fairly sparsely populated. But there were men. Women too, but that wasn't the point. Rudius wondered if it was right to expose the naked bodies of his wives. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem right there. And daughters to the eyes of strange men, even more so. Definitely not. Not to mention, he had someone else's woman with him. Elise was there. Sure, she had been once a sexy stripper who'd sent the adventuring world ablaze, but now she was with Cliff. Was it really right for him to lay eyes on her sexy body? Nope, no way. For that reason, he'd come prepared. They were simple tunics made from dark fabric. Despite not being waterproof, they offered the natural comfort of swimwear. Design credit went to Aisha Greyrat. You know, that's actually kind of funny because you would think with somebody like Rudius, who is from Japan, which does have like hot springs and open air baths and stuff like that, you would think he'd be less worried about this kind of stuff, but there is technically gender separations with a lot of hot springs and whatnot in Japan. I don't even know how often they actually have mixed ones. I'm sure there's plenty of mixed ones, but I'm sure him being, living in an area that is, a city, he probably was more used to the idea of, separation there. Big sister Aisha, there's a waterfall over there. Oh, where? There, Aisha, over there. Hey, Mama, wait up. Aisha was with Otis, and Sieg, who were all excited to visit the hot springs for the first time. They wandered through the water, exploring the large baths. The dark color of their fabric meant that they didn't go see-through, but it still clung to their bodies when it got wet, accentuating every line of their figures. Aisha and Edis wandered here and there, their bodies on full display. Edis probably didn't notice, but Aisha, wasn't she embarrassed? Yeah, I could see Edis not giving a crap. Well, whatever. So long as the important bits were covered up, it was fine. It was only embarrassed if you feel embarrassed. Reese hoped that they wouldn't make trouble for the other bathers, though. Even a place like this had etiquette to follow. Yeah, Aisha, I would assume that she'd be bothered by it. I mean, I don't think that she's bothered by the family seeing her, but yeah, other people maybe. Lucy then spoke up. Hey, Blue Mama, have you been here before too? Yes, I did. A very long time ago. Roxy answered. Tell me. Oh, all right. It was when I just left the Demon Continent, after finally graduating from being a fledgling adventurer. Roxy, holding Lily in her arms, told Lucy old stories, while Clive listened nearby. Reese wondered if his face was so pink because Lucy was beside him in thin clothes. Stop, Rudius. There's like certain points where it's like, dude, you don't have to keep thinking about these things. It's like, it's fine because it's like, this is a natural flow of his mindset. He's obviously going to be thinking about things like, you know, hey, who's interested in my daughter or something like that. But like, there's a line there, dude. Clive, my lad, Rudius thought. It's a bit too soon to be having those sorts of thoughts. Your dad and I aren't going to let you go romancing this young. Is our lady savior then? Oh, great sacred beast? Oof. Oh my. Lada and Leo were surrounded by beast folk. All these people are getting glimpses of her beforehand. She hasn't even gone back to the Great Forest, and all these people are getting like a sneak peek. Lada and Leo were surrounded by beast folk. Lada wore the same dull expression she always had. But Rudius saw an undercurrent of annoyance in it. Understandable. This had been going on ever since they entered the inn town. Lilia spoke up nearby. Tell me if you get too hot, Miss Chris. I have drinks ready. Chris just made a grumbling sound. Lily had places in it at the foot bath and was watching Chris. At first, Chris had come into the water in Rudius' arms, but she didn't seem to like the hot water because she had gotten out straight away. Now she clung tight to Zenith. It doesn't get better than this. I've never had dwarf alcohol before. It's pretty potent, isn't it? Tasty, though. Meanwhile, Sylphie, Elnlise, Cliff, Talhan, and Rudius were drinking together in a circle in the corner of the bath. Their drinks were a secret dwarf brew that Rudius had picked out back at the inn town, chilled with ice. He'd never tasted anything like it. He couldn't have guessed what it was made from, but it was damn good. Light on the nose with a crisp finish and lingering floral notes. The chilled drink washed through his flushed body before gently warming him from the inside. Yeah, this is always funny because I think this has happened before where, like, I assume that a dwarven drink is going to be, like, super, like, strong. Like, they can take the tough stuff. And it's always different. I mean, even Talhan himself, it's like, you would think this guy, like, takes forever to get drunk or whatever. Or that, you know, he gets drunk all the time. Though he did mention at some point he doesn't drink a lot because he's saving money. Like, he's still thoughtful about saving money. It just breaks a lot of the tropes that you would have with dwarves and with him specifically. Rudy, hey. Pour me another one. I don't mind if my husband is the one plying me with alcohol. It hadn't taken Sylphie long to get drunk. She was leaning on Rudius, a glazed look on her face. She was always so cute like this. But they kissed their kids with that mouth. They had to make sure that it stayed between them. Coming right up. He was soaking in the hot spring, his arm around the waist of a beautiful woman, as they shared a delicious drink. It really didn't get any better than this. It was heaven, or so you think. See, he kept getting these chills. Really persistent chills. It's so funny. This is one of those moments where it's like, didn't we already establish this? Didn't we already get a hint here, Rudius? Why did we have to go through this again? Another like half a chapter of Rudius trying to figure out what's the deal with Talhan. Like, he just literally cannot seem to grasp this idea. He knew where they were coming from too. The source was a man quietly sipping his drink directly opposite from him. Talhan, a former member of Paul's party, Fangs the Black Wolf, from back in the day. Even now, he was active as an S-rank adventurer, a real get-it-done type. Reese had no reason to doubt him as a gentleman. If he tried to pull anything, he could handle him. Reese had also interviewed him thoroughly, to be sure that he wasn't one of the man god's disciples. Of course, Reese hadn't spotted Geese. That bastard had lied through his teeth when questioned, then carefully torn a hole in their lives, knowing that Reese couldn't completely trust Talhan. But if he started thinking like that, he'd have no friends. He had decided that he would trust him. That left the question, what was bothering him? When Talhan looked at him, it sent shivers down his spine. It had been like this on the road to the hot springs too. While the kids rode in the carriage, the rest of them acted as guards. Edis took the lead in front of Rudius and Elnlise. Talhan walked directly behind him, and Sylphie and Roxy brought up the rear. As Rudius walked, smoothing out the road with earth magic so that the carriage would pass comfortably. He kept getting chills, only looked back to see Talhan watching him. Well, they were walking in the same direction. It was no surprise their eyes met when he looked back. Reese even wondered if he was just on extra edge, because they were taking kids through an area where monsters sometimes showed up. But Talhan was still watching him, right now. And he was still getting chills. It just didn't make any sense. There's a beast behind me in an area full of beasts. For some reason, my butt feels like there's just lasers looking right at it for some reason. Again, this is like one of those moments like, Ellen Lease legit said specifically he chews up men and spits them out or something like that. I forget the exact like terminology she used there, but the idea there was that he's a man-eater. Rudius. Are we not going to end here? I love how like the anime emphasized it too. Like that whole scene where Rudius first shows up with Paul and the Beggaret continent. He's just like, or something like that. Like he gave him like some stupid response. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's just like completely obvious. And old Rudius, as usual, oblivious. Is everything all right?
Why do you ask?
You've been staring at me a lot since we got on the road.
Oh, that. I was just thinking about how much you remind me of Paul these days. Couldn't tear my eyes away.
Of my dad?
Aye. Seen you walk side by side with Ellen Lease. Brought back old memories.
Talhan stroked his beard, his tone wistful. God, it's so difficult to get his voice down. I'm probably going to fluctuate a lot with him because he's very difficult for me to, like, keep my voice on him because it slips out so easy. It's not a straining voice. It's not a strain. It's funny because a lot of people point out, like, be careful with this voice or this voice. And it's like, actually, these voices are, like, Orsted. A lot of people assume that Orsted's voice is difficult for me to do. It's actually one of the easier ones. It's another one that's hard to keep in, and I have to keep training myself to keep on it. But it's not, like, strenuous. Geese was strenuous. Geese, I'm so happy that bastard dead because he was a lot of... He just made my throat tickle. Yo, boss! Talhan stroked his beard, his tone wistful.
Ellen Lease, Ghislaine, and Paul's back in front of mine. The sound of geese and Zenith's voice behind me. Exploring labyrinths with the fangs of the Black Wolf.
Reese wasn't sure about the resemblance, but he couldn't see his own back. Why exactly did his stares give him the shivers anyways? It was unusual. I mean, there was a side of me that did sort of believe there was a chance that Talhan liked Paul. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that. I mean, if he's, again, looking at Rudius's butt or whatever, and he's like, I would assume that he probably thought Paul was pretty hot too. I don't doubt that. But I think it's probably like a both situation. Like he does get that nostalgia looking at Rudius, but at the same time, yeah, he probably thinks that Rudius is pretty hot. You best watch yourself with that dwarf, Rudius. Emily spoke up, her head resting on Cliff's shoulder. He goes for men as well. Eh? Rudius spoke before he could help himself. Talhan looked sulky.
Don't say things like that. You'll give him the wrong idea.
Rudius wondered why Ellie's mind would go straight to sex, that dirty elf. What?
I only go for men.
That dirty dwarf, Rudius thought. Wait a minute. What was that what the chills were? Did Talhan have designs for him? Rudius belonged to his sweet Edis, so no touching. She cut him clean in half. Without thinking, Rudius clung to Sylphie, trembling. She gave Talhan a fierce, protective look.
Relax, lad. I don't go for married men. Or men who aren't inclined to it.
And yeah, I could see that being the reason why he probably never, like, went after Paul. Again, it wasn't until Rudius got there that suddenly Talhan's looking at him, but he never went after Rudius either. Like, he's looking. Like, he looks. He just don't touch. He has that limit there. So that's why he's not going after Rudius. He wasn't going after Paul. And, again, with Paul, before he was even married with Zenith, he noticed that Paul wasn't into it. It's not like he's going to go out and force himself on people. It's just to Ellie's little joke there of consuming men. So he had morals. Well, when considered, Talhan just had slightly different preferences from other people. His dating pool was different and smaller. That was all. Nothing that weird about it. Yeah. He needs to get with those royalties and those nobles. They like that stuff. They like trying everything. You still ogle men's butts, though, don't you? Ellie's teased, but Talhan frowned.
A man can't help but appreciate a nice behind.
After answering Ellie's, Talhan addressed Rudius.
You understand, don't you?
Rudius did understand, of course. Just now, Rudius had been staring at Edis's butt as she wandered around the bath. Just then, Edis looked his way. She didn't get a chill, did she? She then covered her chest. She totally did. But she had fallen in Rudius's trap. She was covering the wrong weak point.
I was telling the truth when I said you reminded me of Paul from the old days. Well, if it bothers you.
Oh, no. If it's just nostalgia, knock yourself out. You keep looking at my butt.
Hey, you want to look? You want to look? I'll look. I'll show it to you. I do apologize.
Talhan smiled, then picked up a bottle.
No, I was about another round.
Don't mind if I do. There was no accounting for taste. If he said that he'd behave in a virtuous way towards him, Reese seen no need to distrust him. No harm in looking without touching. Though, if he started making comparisons between them, Reese would come out the loser. Talhan was a muscle-bound bear of a man. Yeah, and it's funny because I didn't see Reese actually having a problem with Talhan in the fact that he prefers men. Again, and this is one of those things where it's like so troubling that people are so like nasty about Mushoku Tensei. Nasty about things. Like, especially during the airing of the second season. People are painting it as being like negative against gay relationship. It's like, did you not watch the same thing we did? Reese literally was accepting if Fitz was a boy, he was attracted to him. He was going to accept being into a man with Fitz because he was attracted. And he's like, well, but it's a boy. I guess I'm into this. Like, he was accepting it. Reese was perfectly fine with it. It was just a discovery moment for him and a little bit of confusion there, but he was accepting it. I'm attracted to Fitz senpai. I guess I'm gay. Okay. If it's working and that's sure. He don't care. So why would he be bothered by Talhand? Refugion's very open-minded to this kind of stuff. Refugion's very, like, logical in the thinking of, like, you know, if that's it, if that's what gets you, that's fine. You do you. I don't care. Reese the same way. He's into that. What? I mean, we're going to get out of the bath? Everybody get out. Talhan! He's after dudes. Everybody get out of the bath. I was pretty sure that at some point he mentioned Fitz, but I guess not. All of a sudden, Emily spoke up. You know, I didn't expect you to agree to guide us.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, you've been avoiding returning home, haven't you? This hot springs is within dwarf territory. It'll be a nuisance if you run into anyone you know, won't it? It sounded like Talhan had something of his own stuff going on. Kind of think of it, out of all of the former party members of Paul's, he was the only one Reese didn't know well. He hadn't taken an interest. Yeah, like I was saying before, this is the one of that party that we have not deep dive into. We've gotten pretty much all of Keylane's story. We've gotten a massive chunk of Annalise, but we still don't know her life before the whole incident that wiped her memory. But again, that's going to be one of those things where somebody else that's long lived is going to have to tell us about it. Is there anybody that could do that? But other than that, we know everything about Annalise. We know pretty much all of Zenith's story, know all of Paul's story, know all of Geese's story. We don't know about Talhan. Talhan's the only one that we haven't got into. After a long pause, Talhan replied,
Back we were traveling together. You said you never could settle down with just one man. What happened?
Living life changes you.
That's how it is for me. I thought now was a good time, as ever, to settle things.
Oh my, how manly. I like that. And I think it seems to be implying here that probably through the other people's actions, he's decided, you know what? I think I'm going to try. I think after seeing all of my former party members, they've all moved on. They've all changed their life. They've all settled down. Maybe I should. Paul settled down. Zenith settled down. We'll ignore Geese. Ghislaine settled down. She's now working in the guard and everything like that. Annalise is married, has a child, is settling down. Maybe it's my turn.
I don't want your flattery. Looking at all of you made me see what a total disgrace I am. Running away from my own family for so long. That's all.
Talhan down his drink. A sour look on his face. Yep, right there. You're going home then?
You can say that.
Hey, Rudius. Annalise had a question in her voice. For a moment, Rudius couldn't understand why. Then he realized that she was saying that this was the perfect chance to ask Talhan. Rudius wondered if he should, though, given whatever was going on with his family. No harm in putting out feelers, though. Actually, Talhan, I was planning on going to see the Ore God.
You are?
Yeah, and, I mean, only if you're open to it. But I'd be really grateful if you could pass on a message that the Dragon God's follower, would like to see him. Reese didn't know what sort of pull Talhan had back at home. It might be in a position to make him be his go-between. So Reese treaded carefully. Talhan grumbled.
Thing is, he's not the friendliest guy.
Orsted had said that too. The Ore God was difficult to deal with and harder to win over. He was fond of his alcohol, jewels, and ores and metals fit for smithing. But flashing a few shiny presents at him wouldn't be enough to get him to agree on an alliance.
Even if you ask him, he may not say yes.
Do you know him? Talhan nodded, scowling.
You could say that.
Reese wondered if they were related. Maybe he should have asked Orsted while he was at home during their meetings. Yeah, I would assume that Orsted would have given Rudius something that would have like completely won him over. But again, he mentioned the idea that like gifts isn't going to get it. He technically does in the end, if I remember correctly. Gives him some sort of ore. I'm not going to demand anything. I know you got your own stuff going on.
Indeed.
Talhan said thoughtfully. Then down another drink. He let out another sigh that stank of alcohol. His face flushed. Then he gave Rudius a smile.
Mind if I think on it a little?
Not at all. I'm sorry to put this on you. Rudius was about to bow, but Talhan picked up a bottle and turned the mouth towards him. Seemed he wanted Rudius to stop apologizing and drink. He let Talhan fill his cup. After getting out of the bath, they headed back to the inn town. Rudius had the family wait at their lodgings, then went out with Roxy, Talhan, and Annalise to find a place to set up a teleportation circle. And that's it for the hot springs. That legit is it for the hot springs. It's like legit, they just show up. Rudius like worried about them exposing themselves. I gave them all outfits. They're kind of tight. Oh yeah, over here you got Clive is eyeballing Lucy. You have Edis is over here. I checked out her butt and she covered her chest. And Talhan keeps staring at me, and I'm getting the chills. That's the whole Hot Springs episode, everybody. Congratulations, you got your Hot Springs episode. Bit of a letdown. It's a bit of a letdown. That is sort of the side effect of the fact that everybody shows up. It's fine. It's a Hot Springs episode. We get a picture out of it at least. I forgot to check the picture. I think there's a picture, right? I must remember. There it is. Yeah, I've seen the picture. God damn, Edis. They went ham on Edis's chest. It seems like it's a little... Anyways, sorry. You could definitely tell the art has definitely evolved over time. Like comparing like the later stuff artwork to like the early stuff ones. Rudius carefully selected companions who were used to traversing mountains and forests. Edis had wanted to come, but Rudius asked her to stay behind and guard the family. The four of them set off deeper into the mountains, just a little beyond the hot springs. The best spot for the teleportation circle was somewhere remote. Ariel said that she wanted to create teleportation gates to connect major nations, and the plans for that were in works, but it was still long off. The first step was to lift the ban on teleportation magic, but because they didn't know yet if that would come to fruition, Rudius set his own personal circles in areas people didn't frequent. If they went too high, they'd risk ending up in Blue Dragon territory, so they stay within the bounds of where people ventured. Yeah, I'm kind of curious if that would ever get lifted, because again, the whole reason why the ban on the teleportation happened, I think it was confirmed, it could have been speculation, but what they were implying was that because like this whole war happened and they were using them to kind of teleport around the world and bring in armies, they shut it down so that didn't happen. And that makes perfect sense with such a world where there's so many borders and whatnot. You have to stop the ability for invading nations to quickly invade you with a large army. With the fact that it's been banned, it requires armies to have to traverse long distances, allowing you to prepare yourself for their arrival. With them just popping up in the middle of your capital, you're screwed. So they have to ban it. So how can Ariel get that unbanned? What would that require? Other than to literally have to like sanction where the teleportations are placed and how many people can go through the teleportation, and probably set people on the other side of the teleportation circles to be able to notify if something happens on that side. There's an army coming towards the teleportation circle. Once they enter it, they're going to be in our territory. Prepare. Navigating that is difficult. And it's probably going to come to the idea of a lot of agreements of peace. And even then, you can set up the idea of peace, get the teleportations created, and then double cross them and just invade. Like, what is stopping Milis from literally invading Asra if they can have a teleportation circle set pretty close to the capital? Or vice versa. I kind of wonder if they'd be able to get that cleared up. I really don't think they can. No, the only way that I can see it happening is if everybody confirms and they're on board, or at the moment that it does happen, come together and unite over Laplace himself. And I could probably see during the time of the war happening that coming to fruition. But again, at the same time, Laplace can use that. You're letting yourself open for Laplace getting to very quickly. Around here should work. Once they found a good spot, it was time to construct a building. He would structure it after the Dragonfolk's ruins with 4 rooms. one of which would have a hidden staircase that led down to where they would set up a teleportation circle. He had Roxy and Annalise keep a watch outside, then used earth magic to dig a hole in the ground and began to carve out a room. Talhan helped with the interior and the size specifications. This wasn't an easy place to find, but the circle was going to link up to the office. On the off chance someone stumbled across it, they'd have a problem. I mean, it happened already once before. Again, you keep doing this. Therefore, they dressed it up like an ordinary old ruin, but also put a treasure chest in the corner of one of the front rooms to keep travelers from delving deeper. They'd also set it up so people could rest there, giving a vibe that said, just a ruined rest stop for travelers from days of yore. Nothing to see here. That was why he needed Talhan's help. As expected, a dwarf knew how to work with his hands. Shut up, Andrew. He used a super hard chisel Rudius had made to carve the stone. Oh my gosh, my brain just went down a really bad gutter. Talhan, this dwarf, knows how to work with his hands. He used a chisel that Rudius made to carve that stone. He gave the whole room an antiquated look. By the time the sun had set, it looked like it had been standing there for hundreds of years. Amazing work. This'll fool everyone.
There's no moss or mold. Anyone who knows what to look at will see right through it.
It seemed the craftsman wasn't fully satisfied with his forgery, but no one was going to walk up right at this minute. So by the time that people found the place, it ought to be authentically grubby. It wasn't like anyone would maintain it. I mean, just like use some wind magic, just throw some dust in there, some dirt. Come to think of it, it's a bit like to ask, but is it even okay for us to just throw up a building here? This is dwarf territory, isn't it?
The dwarf believe the mountains belong to the gods, and buildings are offerings to them. Anyone can build anything like this. It won't be a problem.
So that's how it worked. That's an interesting way of thinking things, and that makes sense. That makes sense to a dwarf. I mean, the mindset that I typically have of like a fantasy dwarf is the idea that they're, they live inside the mountains. They're constantly mining up ore and resources. They're forging things. They're building things all the time. So to what's typically a very craft-focused race, the idea of building things is an offering. You build things, and your craftsmanship is how you glorify them. Look at what I have created. Isn't this beautiful? I've worked as hard as I can to craft this for you. You build a building, it's an offering. Look what I've built for you. That's why Talhan's there, and he's handcrafting, chiseling all this stuff for the offering. It's a cool concept. So that's how it worked. In that case, maybe they should have built the whole thing above ground. Putting the entrance underground felt like it was something to hide there. But the work was done, so no point in worrying. Yeah, let's make a massive tower, Talhan. Let's start over.
If you're done, let's get moving.
Just a minute. Reese activated the magic circle, then tested the teleportation. After making sure it dropped him in the office, he came back. All okay. Talhan was silent. You're welcome to use the circle if you ever need it, Talhan. He shook his head.
No thanks. I prefer to walk.
The teleportation circle was complete, so it was time to go home. Now, to be fair, I haven't fully analyzed Talhan's chapter, so I don't remember if they actually imply anything about this, but I am kind of curious about that. Why is it specifically going out of its way to say, okay, they were about to leave, but then I told him I had to test it. I tested it, and he went silent. What is bothering Talhan about the teleportation circle? Has he used it before? Has he experienced that technology before? And it bothers him to see it. Did he make a mistake in the past with teleportation or magic of some sort? And now he's not liking seeing this. I get the idea of I prefer to walk. This is a guy that's traveled around everywhere. But this is a massive convenience. This isn't about I like to travel. I don't want to use this. I mean, you can use it. The alternative is to travel for freaking months, if years, to get all the way up there. This is going to save you a lot of time. I'm sticking on that point. Maybe I'll get into it later. The next day dawned. They decided to leave the inn town early that morning. This is where they would part with Cliff and Talhan. Didn't even get into Cliff at all. He went with them, but he didn't talk to them at all. Poor Cliff went with the party and didn't even get involved in anything. While they stood to the side, the rest of them piled in the carriage and said goodbye. Cliff would spend the day looking around the church, then head back to Milshin after that. You be good, Clive. I will, Dad. Cliff didn't want to part with his son. It wasn't like they would be apart for years, but it was always hard to say goodbye to family. Yeah, especially at the age of Clive, and again, the fact that he hasn't been able to spend as much time with Clive as he probably would hope. Yeah, this probably sucks for Cliff. Yeah, it sucks for Annalise because, again, she has the curse to deal with, and she wants to be with the one that she loves. But yeah, from Cliff's perspective, that's even worse than the idea that he can't be with his son and his wife that he loves so much. One of the main reasons why he's doing what he's doing is for Elise. Be sure to apply yourself in your studies and your sword work. Oh, and don't make the girl you like cry. Be nice to her. I don't have a girl I like. Then be nice to all girls you think you might like. Understood? Yes, Dad. Cliff gave Clive a pat on the head and then turned to Rudius. Rudius, I'm counting on you to take care of Elise and Clive for a few more years. Don't worry, I know. You do your best, Cliff. Yeah. Best boy Cliff gets put at the sidelines again. I'd like to see a chapter of what Cliff has been doing this entire time within Milshin. Just like a quick kind of run through of like some things that he's faced and his build up and whatnot. It's obviously seemed like he has grown a lot being there. And again, a lot of that has to do with that separation. And that was to his choice. He didn't want Rudius to do this for him. He wanted to do it. Cliff stepped back as if no other words were necessary, and he wasn't worried. Rudius hoped that he was worthy of that sort of trust. At least Elise had it together, so he wouldn't need to do much. Yeah, Rudius could at least offer guidance to Clive so that he grew up to be a good man, just in case he asked for Lucy's hand when he came of age, though he had the feeling he might do more harm than help. Rudius' advice. Not needed. He'd settle for lending a hand to Clive if he got in trouble. That should be enough. Next, Rudius went a short distance away to Talhan, who was talking with Elise and Roxy. Talhan was going back to Milshin for the time being. He had some things to prepare before going to the dwarves. Whether those things were physical or emotional, Rudius didn't know. So wrong, dude. Thank you, Talhan.
Oi.
I hope it goes well with your family and your hometown.
I can't say I'm happy with Paul's son fussing over me.
Talhan muttered, then looked down at Rudius with a stare. Looked down at him? I guess he might be up on a carriage. How does a dwarf look down on a human? Rudius had the feeling that he was especially focused on his crotch. Oh, look down at his crotch. Okay. I forgot that comment. Okay. How do you look down at... It's probably eye level. It's probably eye level. I guess technically if he's looking up to Rudius and he's like, yeah, and then he looks down at his crotch, I guess there you could, yeah. Anyways, moving on.
I had a thought this morning. If he showed him that one thing, that might be actually enough to convince the Orgod to meet with you.
What thing?
That black heart thing you showed me yesterday.
The what? A black heart thing around his crotch? Rudius wondered if the Orgod was gay too. But no, that thing wasn't black. Although it was plenty hard, right? Not that he compared it with anyone else's. Rudius wanted Roxy to stop blushing and say something. It's mine or whatever. God damn, dude. Elise then spoke up. Talhan, when all you say is black, hard, and thick, we don't know what you mean. Speak more plainly.
I never said it thick.
So stupid.
I never said anything about thick. You know, the stone thing that Rudius made with earth magic. Or rock, metal. I don't know rightly what you call it.
Stone. He meant stone. Rudius had made a lot of black stone to build with the day before. Really hard stone to make sure that it was sturdy. Roxy was blushing, making Rudius wondered what she imagined. She was embarrassed. Not that Rudius imagined anything different.
If you got a sample, I can take it to him. What do you say?
Can do. Then and there, Rudius used earth magic to fashion a rod out of stone. It was black, hard, and thick. Naturally, it was also heavy. At 15 centimeters, it probably weighed more than 10 kilograms. With some gold plating, you could probably fool someone into thinking that was a real thing, but it was much, much harder than gold or platinum. So, deception wouldn't last long. Yeah, gold isn't that strong. But it did make me wonder, why didn't you make one of these for, like, Sander or something? Like, he probably would like that. Will this work?
That's the stuff. Could you make me a few more?
Rudius made 5 more bars that Talhan took, smiling at their weight. 5 bars were seriously heavy, but Talhan was a seasoned adventurer.
Safe travels.
Talhan was about to go when Roxy stepped forward. Take care of yourself, Talhan.
You keep yourself healthy too, Roxy.
I will. Talhan smiled at her, which Roxy returned as she bid farewell to her friend. Yeah, that was definitely a part that kind of caught me off guard right there. Is the idea that, yeah, technically Roxy and Talhan were traveling buddies. Like, they went around to a lot of places together. Again, when Bodigadi separated from them on the Demon Continent, he took Elise with him. And so Roxy and Talhan traveled alone together as a pair all the way through the Demon Continent before Roxy could eventually meet with Paul. So the two of them spend a lot of time together. And I would argue, really, with Elise, Roxy, and Talhan together, Talhan was probably somebody that Roxy communicated with more because she had her issues with Elise and her proclivities and what she wanted. They were really good friends. Again, another one of those ones where I would really love to see more stories of the two of them together. With that, their family holiday came to a close. Ruius guessed he spent all of it working, but he still thought it had been a good trip. He had hoped that it had been a worthwhile experience for the kids' enrichment that would lead them to becoming excellent, contributing members of society. And, wait, that didn't sound like him at all. He hoped that they all grew up happy. And that's it. That's the whole travel. That's the whole travel. A good end to this. This is not like my favorite chapter overall, especially since this volume's been pretty damn good so far. Especially everything around Milshin specifically. But it's a good little kind of, I guess, worm in to what we're going to get into in a minute, which is Talhan himself. Which chapter 6, Talhan of the Harsh, Large Mountain Summit. Talhan of the Large, Harsh Mountain Summit. It's the same title. Talhan of the Harsh, Large Mountain Summit was a 37th of 51 siblings. Damn! Dwarves getting busy. Dwarves getting busy. He had been born into an ordinary dwarf family and grew up surrounded by so many brothers and sisters. Obviously, not all 51 of them were the same mother. Obviously? No, that's new to me. Thank you for letting me know. A little known fact about dwarves was that their village raised all children of the same generation together. Interesting. Kind of get a little bit of a sense of something like the Beggar Continent and how they raised the warriors. It was similar to a school, except that they all thought of each other as siblings for the rest of their lives. Okay. Well, it's saying different mother. It still implies that the father had 51 kids. The village did this so that none of the children knew whose families were rich or poor. Interesting. That's actually really cool. That's actually, like, if a society could do that, if a community could do that, that's actually really cool. Though I still believe in the idea that I think that parental figures are very important. This made it easier for everyone to get along when, in the future, they assumed positions of responsibility in the village. Someone would be chief, some would support the chief, and others would be wives. This was the only case for those privileged enough to live in the village. Dwarves who left the village had no such customs. So specific to this dwarf village, or a dwarf village, is how they handle their children. So this goes back to the original point. They're implying that they possibly don't know who the father is. It's just that all the children are raised by the same town and community, and they're all seeing each other as equals, as siblings. 51 total of his generation were all seeing each other as siblings. They all had different mothers. It doesn't imply anything about the father themselves, which makes me believe that once they're born, they know who their mother is, but they're raised by all the fathers in all of the village. Again, it's a very interesting way of sort of keeping that equality amongst all of them. In any case, Talhan grew up an ordinary child with dozens of brothers and sisters. He was interested in earth and iron. He liked the taste of alcohol, and he looked up to the smiths and builders. The only thing about him that was a little unusual was that he preferred men to women. One of his siblings, however, was far less than ordinary. The odd one was his younger brother, the 38th of their 51 siblings. Godbard of the proud heavenly peak. Godbard had talent. All dwarf children began to learn smithing, crafts, and basic earth magic when they were barely out of the cradle. But Godbard outshone each and every one. Give him a hammer, he'd forge steel as hard as any adult's. Set him to crafting, he'd produce ornaments so marvelous they defied belief. Show him a building, he'd fix everything wrong with it in a blink of an eye. Dwarves live longer than humans. Around the time that Godbard's talents started to manifest, there was still old folks alive who remembered the Laplace War. In Godbard, they saw the very image of the Orgod who had died in that battle. Okay, so they're implying the fact that this Godbard is going to be the new Orgod already, right here. Because the old one's dead. Because of that, Godbard was regarded as the Orgod in waiting and given special treatment. That implies the connection that Talhan has with him. Again, I haven't really read much of this. I just know it's about Talhan. It was impressed upon the other children that they must defer to him as their future leader. After that, Talhan changed. His interest in smithing and craftwork evaporated. He realized that no matter how much painstaking effort he put into his work, it would always fall short to what Godbard could knock together without a thought. It wasn't that anyone was comparing them, of course. In order to make comparisons, the adults would have to look at anyone other than Godbard's creations. Then, was he driven to be the best? Or did he hate living in Godbard's shadow? No. It was neither. Actually, Talhan and Godbird got on well. When they all became brothers and sisters, Godbird was his friend and his first love. Talhan was happy that Godbird would become the Ore-God, and all he wanted was to be useful to him. He imagined that he could make up for what Godbird lacked, acting as his right-hand man. With that in mind, Talhan devoted himself to magic. He focused in particular on mastering water and wind magic, which the dwarves saw no need for. The first Ore-God was said to have been a Saint-tier earth magician. He created a marvelous sword from ore he produced with his own magic. However, it was also said that an elf skilled with wind and water magic had been essential to that great blade. Interesting. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Interesting that they go into the idea that he sort of gave up because he was so good. Because he's in the shadow of somebody that is so skilled, what is the point in even trying? It's always going to be outshadowed by Godbird. But it's also saying that nobody is really comparing them. It's just Talham himself is doing this. But he's also acknowledging the idea that they're not comparing because they're all looking at Godbird. Yeah, technically you're not seeing them criticizing Talhand because they're just not looking at him, and in effect that is sort of a side effect. The adults would have had to look at anyone but Godbird. They're only looking at him. But I like the fact that it's not really saying that he's upset at Godbird. And in fact, he's in love with him. It's his first love. And because he's not able to meet the standards that he has, he just chooses instead to support him. And I love that. Though, I am now questioning in my brain, did we ever mention that Talhan used water magic? I don't recall. But yes, this does technically make sense. The fact that the first Ore-God, and I'm going to assume that this was a dwarf, because the assumption that the Ore-God was going to be a dwarf, because dwarves are about crafting. You take ore, it's about mining or using it for some sort of smithing. It's very dwarf related. And they're implying here they died back here, and now that Godbird is showing that he's so talented, he's going to be the next Ore-God. So that implies the idea that it's always been a dwarf typically. It makes sense that, yes, they would need some sort of support from somebody with wind or water magic because, yeah, these are things that kind of fall in that category of the affinity magic stuff they were getting in with the first volume. And the idea that, again, with Sylphie, she burnt herself, and thus she doesn't have an affinity to fire magic. These are things that within the environment that somebody's raised that will affect their affinity towards a magic. There's ones that kind of push them away from certain elements, and there's things that draw them to certain elements. With dwarves, because they're underground, they don't learn water because they're afraid of water flooding them. So that's sort of something that they're not really prone to learning because something makes them fear it. It's like an instincts thing. So yes, it makes sense that the previous Ore-God probably knew somebody that had that to support him. A smith needed more than just earth and fire. There had to be air to stoke the flames and water to quench the steel. Yet the adults were not interested in understanding these other elements, and I wonder if that sort of limits a lot of them, as opposed to the previous Ore-God. They brought up every excuse under the sun to dissuade Talhan from pursuing water and wind magic. Even if it's to support Godbard, that's interesting. Unless he's not specifying. It wasn't traditional. It was against propriety. None of their ancestors did it. Dwarves were no good at it. Talhan was more naturally talented at earth magic than water and wind magic. But when Godbird told him, I think it's a fine idea, the adults of the village are too stuck in their ways, Talhan took courage and devoted himself even more to his magic. As a result, Talhan found himself growing apart from the other Dwarven men, and some of his brothers started to criticize him. They said he was soft, that his smithing was effeminate, unbecoming of a dwarf man. All a dwarf needed magic for was breaking up hard bedrock. They said, for smithing, nature provided everything they needed. Talhan, though he found some of these slights tiresome, continued to gradually hone his skills. All of it he did for Godbard. Once Godbard grew up and became the Ore-God, he needed Talhan's power. He was sure of it. Again, interesting that they're going against this, which makes me believe that they didn't see the elf that was supporting the previous Ore-God as being something that enhanced them at all. They're implying through the storytelling that that elf allowed that Ore-God to smith something incredible, provided the wind to stoke the flames, provided the water to quench the heat. I want to do that for Godbard. And everybody's telling him, don't do that, and everything else you're doing is weak, and that you're a failure. Why would they not see that there's some sort of value to that? They're all saying the earth provides it. The story is saying that that was required. Godbard's accepting it. And Talhan's going for that, but the people don't seem to believe it. It's interesting. After he came of age, the critical guidance gave way to resigned incredulity. His brothers treated him like an outcast, and he developed a reputation as the oddest oddball in the village. Even then, his certainty never wavered. This guy's devotion, dude. This is all making a lot of... We're not even this far into this, and I already understand why Talhan left. I can already see that he fails to probably develop his skills to support Godbard, and eventually he just leaves because he's seen as a failure by everybody. That they're going to assign him as being the Orgod, and they're going to tell him to stay away from Godbard. You're going to cause problems for Godbard. You're not worthy to be around Godbard. That's what they're going to do. The day finally arrived, the day that Godbard would be ordained as the Orgod. Tradition dictated that the one who would assume the title of Orgod forged 5 swords. For each, he would select someone from whom he trusted above all others to assist him. In doing this, he himself picked out the core leaders who would support the dwarf village after he becomes Orgod. Naturally, Talhan put his name forward. This is what he had been honing his skills for. To his shock, Godbard did not choose him. First, he chose the 3 who were considered the village's most talented at the time, and then he chose his lover. Those weren't so bad. It was the final person Godbard chose that upset Talhan, the old man who had called him a fool. Talhan protested. It was outrageous, he said. He devoted his life to Godbard. Godbard asked him, "Can you even forge a decent sword?" "Of course," Talhan said. "A sword is nothing. I can do it. Just give me a chance." Godbard didn't look happy about it, but he agreed to humor Talhan's plea. The narrow-minded old man and Talhan would each forge a sword. Whoever made the better sword would win. To ensure impartiality, Godbard opened up the contest to anyone who thought he could win. To Talhan's alarm, a great many people came to compete. For all that he had trained in water and wind magic for this moment, he hadn't picked up a smith's tool since he was a child. He could count the number of decent swords he had forged on one hand. His disadvantage was too great. It sucks, dude! Let me go back up. Where was it at? Talhan was more naturally talented at earth magic than water and wind magic, but when Godbard told him, "I think it's a fine idea," the adults of the village were just too stuck in their ways. Talhan took courage and devoted himself even more to his magic. Now, this is third person. This is not first person. This is a third person portrayal of what happened here. It's not getting specific about what all happens with Godbard after that, just that Talhan goes and does this thing, and he devotes to this thing, and then we have this selection happen. Nothing really here clarifies that Godbard himself wanted Talhan to overly dedicate and leave everything else behind. That aspect could be Talhan's wrongdoing. Yeah, I said that's a great idea. They're stuck in their ways. Not that he's using Talhan to see if he'll learn this, but more so that he's just supporting Talhan. Yeah, if that's what you want to do, I think that's great. But nothing there is saying that Godbard owes him anything. I do want to acknowledge that. Nothing here so far says that Godbard owes Talhan a position, because Talhan wanted to do that. Nothing says that Godbard is dedicated to the idea that Talhan will support him with that magic, just that he's supporting Talhan in learning that. It still sucks, though. It still sucks, though. He literally sacrificed everything to support Godbard, but it implies Godbard didn't care. We'll see, though. "Wait," he begged. "I want to help you forge a sword." To his shock, Godbard turned him down. He said, "How could a man who can't even forge a proper sword on his own understand what I want? If you can't understand that, you can't help me. How can a man who can't even forge a sword on his own understand what I want?" It's so mean, but I get it. I get it. Okay, going on my own experience. The many jobs that I've done, for example, procurement. If somebody comes in my door and says, "Hey, can I be your assistant?" And I go, "What is your experience in procurement or, inventory numbers or anything?" I don't know. I haven't done anything. But I'll learn. That's great, by the way, that you're willing to learn, but that doesn't help me. I can't hire you because you don't even know how the numbers work. You don't know how to use the software. I'd have to sit here with you to explain my job for you to learn it. If you don't know math, if you don't know numbers, if you don't know spreadsheets, if you don't know Excel, if you don't know this software, if you don't know inventory, you're useless to me. Yes, you can claim that you learn how to use a calculator really well, but if you don't know how my job itself functions, that calculator's useless. Basically, I'm trying to make some sort of comparison here that works in my brain. It's so cruel, but it makes sense. If you don't know how this system works, you can't help me. Basically, you have to know how a sword is made to know how much wind to blow into those flames. You have to understand how a blade is made to know what temperature that water needs to be, and when to produce the water. This made no sense to Talhan. He thought he knew Godbard better than anyone. How could this happen? His mind was still reeling when he entered the contest. He had no plan, and he lost. God damn, dude. Talhan walked away from the contest devastated, feeling the others' cold gazes like a weight upon his shoulders. A few days later, after watching the ceremony to name the Ore God from afar, he left the village. That sucks. Again, he dedicated everything to him. He neglected all of the training for this one purpose. That's what the elf did. That's the assumption, by the way. The assumption is that's what the elf did. There's a chance the elf that was supporting the previous Ore God was fully knowledgeable about how swords were made. The assumption is they probably didn't smith it themselves, because the assumption is that the elf probably doesn't have the muscle capacity or whatever, or the dexterity to create a sword, but they may have been knowledgeable. A massive betrayal. This probably feels like a massive betrayal. What was my life for? Yeah, this definitely paints the reason why he left. And paints why he never goes back. That's the key thing there. He paints that he never goes back because this is a village full of people that are skilled in blacksmith and whatnot, and crafting and whatnot, and he doesn't have a place there anymore. In time, he became an adventurer, never staying in one place. He found it hard to trust anyone following Godbard's betrayal, so he spent his time alone. Being an outcast for so long made it hard for him to relate to anyone, and he also felt inferior to others because of his preference for men. Although he was one of the lousiest dwarf smiths around, his many years honing his skill had made him a halfway decent magician. Yeah, I would assume that he probably has a decent mana pool, but that may actually require him to have actually, depleted his mana decently well. Even if he was no great talent, to suit his skills, he had to fight wearing heavy armor, somewhere between the style of a warrior and a magician. Still, the life of a sole adventurer was not so arduous. It was around the time that he moved to B rank that Talhan met Ellenlise Dragonroad. At first, her interest in him had been physical. Yeah. Ooh, a dwarf. Let's try a dwarf today. Let me try a dwarf today. Oh, gosh. Oh. She thought she'd bring a young dwarf into her bed for a change. Yep. But he wasn't interested in Ellenlise. So no matter how hard she tried to tempt him, he didn't bite. Oh my gosh, dude. That is some material used against her at some point.
I'll tell you about the time that all... Shut up!
Oh my gosh. No matter how hard she tried to tempt him, he didn't bite. But she was too persistent to just give up, so he finally told her he wasn't interested in women. Ellenlise gasped at him. Then she cackled with laughter. It grated on him, but he put up with it, thinking he'd now be rid of this amorous elf. Only Ellenlise didn't leave. Why? He didn't know. But he suspected that Ellenlise thought that at least she wouldn't have to worry about him keeping his hands to himself. I guess I'd probably put it more in the idea of just having a connection there, that the two of them can sort of relate in some way. They don't have to worry about competing with each other, because she probably would love to be able to hang out with, another female, have a female friend, but there's probably an issue there where she's always snagging up all the men, and thus the girls don't want to be around her. Talhan's different in the idea that he also likes men, but there's not a competition there because there's going to be a lot of men that aren't going to be interested in being with Talhan. Plus, she doesn't have to worry about there being uncomfortableness of them being in the same room. And she could probably just like hanging around with him. Very interesting. That's sort of a cool way of kind of implying some sort of connection made there. as to why they were together as friends, even though they always like to say things like, I'll be dying in a ditch.
Oh, we die in a ditch.
You die in a ditch. You go rot in a cell. Following that, Talhan and Elise teamed up a few times. Elise, a skilled fighter, was a good partner for a magician in heavy armor like Talhan. It was strange, but despite the fact that he'd found her irritating, Talhan didn't mind being in a party with her. It might be because Elise lived unconstrained by any norms, traditions, conventions, or rules. No doubt. No doubt. Again, this was something that was being drilled in his head when he was at his home, that he has to go based on this, and Elise doesn't do that. That being said, they never discussed making their party permanent until the appearance of a young man that shook up things a little. Paul Greyrat. Dirtbag Paul. At the time, Elise, Talhan, Geese, and Ghislaine were all solo, but Paul brought them together to form a party, which they named Fangs of the Black Wolf. Yeah, that was kind of a curious thing, because I was wondering if this would be one of those many inconsistencies with Paul Gaiden, and the idea that they never implied that Talhan and Elise were, like, at the time together. But they could have been separated temporarily, because again, they weren't an actual party. Paul brought them together. There was a bit of a squabble over that name, but that's a story for another time. At least it's better than the other name. All the members of the Fangs Black Wolf had been cast out from their former lives. No. Not true. Not true, no. Geese left and then caused the destruction of his family. Talhan left. It was pretty much a kick-out. Elise left. Pretty much a kick-out. Ghislaine left. Yes, absolutely a kick-out. Paul left. Yes, absolutely kick-out. So yeah, that checks out mostly except for Geese. Yeah, I guess technically Geese is the same situation as Talhan. He wanted something else, and thus he left. But it didn't feel like the town, like, rejected him, really. He just wanted something more. Although Talhan was the only man who liked men, they were free to pursue their desires. Paul, in particular, was uninhibited and free-thinking. When he found out that Talhan liked men, he simply laughed it off. So I'll bed the women, and lace the men, and you take the rest. No one goes to waste, Paul says. What the Paul? What does that even mean, Paul? You dirtbag. You take the rest. All the not women or men, you take the rest. He was a rascal, easy to read, and constantly getting up to antics that made Talhan want to put his head into his hands. But his behavior was never restricted by anything, and he liked to dream about the unconventional. Again, another example of why this particular person, Talhan, chose to follow Paul. Each one of them has a reason for why they're going to follow Paul. That's Talhan. He liked to dream about the unconventional. Just like me. Even when society said what he did was wrong, Paul just followed his instincts, spitting on the ground and saying, I don't give a damn. Paul bore things with a smile that felt revelatory to Talhan. While his behavior made the Fangs of the Black Wolf notorious, Talhan found it fun. In true dwarf fashion, he guffawed at everything Paul did. His feelings towards the other man resembled falling in love, but weren't quite the same. It had to be trust. These members of his party were the first friends he'd ever trusted. Again, coming from the situation with his hometown, despite having all these siblings, which in a lot of cases, siblings are like some of the best potential for friendships. Despite all that, leaving that with that situation, coming here, he found some sort of stability with Elise for a bit, with that acceptance of oddities, and then with Paul breaking the norms and unconventional. I have friends now. Again, another example of somebody that got so much out of having this party and was so comfortable with that party until eventually, this next line, we're going to break it. We're going to break it. His trust, however, was eventually broken. It shattered when Zenith joined the party. The formerly uninhibited Paul started sticking to socially acceptable in an attempt to win Zenith over. Again, they got into this with the stories of the breakup. I was curious as to why Talhan specifically was so pissed. Elise and Talhan, those two specifically, were very pissed. That's why Talhan's pissed. Back there, I got betrayed. I got comfortable, wanted to build towards him, help him being the Ore God. Here I get comfortable, want to help him, want to be at his side, and then break. You accept the unconventional, and now you're trying to go by societal standards. Now you're being all clean for Zenith. That pissed him off. But it gets into, no doubt, these changes helped Paul to grow as a person, so Talhan's saying that's a good thing, but nothing was the same after that. The strife he caused by marrying Zenith, he left deep scars on the hearts of everyone involved. To an outsider, it might have seemed trivial, but it made Talhan decide to never join a party again. Until Paul's family disappears. For a while after that, he traveled on his own. Then came the incident that decimated Fatoa. He reunited with Elnlace, got to know Roxy, and they formed a party together. Yeah, it didn't last very long. I mean, that was a long period of time. Let's be honest. That's a very long period of time. But again, I love that. The fact that he's at least acknowledging it sucks that he's now sticking to societal acceptances. And again, that's against what he had previously, was drawn to Paul for. But he's still seeing that it has helped Paul grow as a person. This is a good thing for him. I'm going to accept that this is what he wants to do. I don't like it. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I liked when we were unconventional, but it does seem like that's helping Paul. It wasn't until the marriage happens. That breaks everything. And yeah, he acknowledges that outsiders looking in goes, who cares? They got married. I mean, adventurers do that all the time. They're venturing together and at some point they meet each other and they get married and then they break off from the party. Who cares? It's a natural order of things. People get married. They have children. But this was, again, a place that he was comfortable in. The first time he was comfortable with a lot of people. They became friends. But the thing that I've always respected, especially about Elnlace and Talhan and Geese and Ghislaine, less about Ghislaine because it feels like she doesn't really kind of think about this stuff as much. I mean, it did wreck her. I'm not ignoring the fact that the party breaking up destroyed Ghislaine. She nearly died. But I always respected the fact that how much they emphasized how the Fangs of the Black Wolf were so angry at Paul. But the moment they found out about his family, they had no questions. They came together and they made a party to look for him. His determination not to be in the party faded, but his feelings around Paul were as fresh as ever. Again, similar to Elnlace, he put it aside. It's not important right now. It wasn't until they traveled to and from the Demon Continent that he saw Paul again. When he laid eyes on Paul after all that time, there was no sign of the young rascal Talhan had known. Paul had become a man, a father, and was now devoting everything he had to search for his family. He'd changed, Talhan thought. He'd grown up. He'd met Paul's son, Rudius, for the first time on the Begret continent. With Paul as a father, he'd expect the boy to be a little bit useless, but he turned out to be unexpectedly mature. Then again, perhaps it wasn't so surprising. His father was the Paul who'd grown up. No, dude, wrong signals there. Wrong signals there, dude. Wrong signals there. When Talhan looked at Paul and Rudius, he felt his chest grow tight, but he could never understand why. I wonder there. I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get into that. I kind of wonder that. A jealousy? He wishes he had that kind of father-son camaraderie. Then, Paul died. It was an unspectacular end. Talhan was shocked, but he recognized that for Rudius, the shock was even greater. So, he avoided letting it show. He went on like nothing had happened, drinking like always. In the aftermath, he left the Begret continent. Wow. Again, this is why I love about seeing this. There's a little snippet in here. It's not that big of a deal, and it makes sense. But the moment that Paul died, Talhan, I don't think they ever implied he really said anything. They didn't really kind of get into specifics about Talhan, but I can see that. He's seen how much it hit Rudius, and he chose to avoid showing it, maybe possibly to help Rudius. He recognized Rudius, the shock was even greater, so he avoided letting it show. I totally relate to this, because I've experienced loss in family, and I chose to not show it. I think I've talked about it here before on a Mushoku Monday before. When my grandmother died, it wrecked my mother. And so I chose to basically not let it show. And it took 2 or 3 years, I think, until it finally just smacked me one night. Finally hit me, and I finally mourned. It took 2 years before I finally cried, because I was too busy from the moment that we found out trying to support my mother. Because it wrecked her. I couldn't let it show.
Talhan went out of his way to support Ruius by covering up his own emotions. Later on, he met Ruius' family. He saw the boy was living well in a house he'd built with a fine family he'd created. Talhan visited Paul's grave and had a drink there, then set off for the magic city of Shariah once more. As he traveled, something inside him finally gave up the ghost. It was something that had been with him ever since he set on to be an adventurer. In the midst of the emptiness that he was left with, Talhan had an idea. He was going to learn to be a smith. Again, leaves home, has nothing, meets Elise, meets Paul, forms party, friendship, party breaks up, gives up on partying, gives up on the stuff. Paul has an incident, decides to party up once again to help out Paul, meets Rudius, sees how incredible they are, loses Paul, hides his own emotions, then later meets Paul's son's family, sees how they're built so well there, walks away from it. At this moment, he has nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's almost an element that because of the displacement incident, he's finally kind of reliving the old days. He's back with Paul and Elise, and they're going in there and Geese, and they're going in there again, and they're at a party again. And it seems like going back home, having a drink in front of Paul's grave, and walking away from the happiness that Ruius has built for himself, he feels so empty and has a desire for something again. Suddenly has a desire for something again. I'm sure they'll get into more in a moment, but I almost have a feeling here where it could be an element of just feeling like he sees everybody's building something. Everybody's building something. And for him himself, he's thinking back to like his core life, his heritage, his hometown. And the thing that comes to his mind is building, crafting, smithing. He couldn't say where this idea came from, but he immediately headed for the Osfer Kingdom. Once there, he ran to the blacksmith's forge to train with while continuing to work as an adventurer. He didn't even take a break when he set off to Millis to earn some money after losing nearly everything that he had when Geese was arrested for gambling. He used all the magic at his disposal in his smithing, fire, earth, wind, water. He supplemented everything he did with it. He forged swords, gauntlets, shields, more swords, armor, helmets, and still more swords. He began to understand what Godbard had said to him back then. He grasped finer details that couldn't be expressed in words, like how to breathe, the timing and rhythm, and the right amount of force to use. Again, that was my assumption, is that Godbard wasn't a bad person. It's just that Talhand, in his own mind, probably felt that he was deceived by Godbard. But in actuality, Godbard acknowledged that he had some shortcomings and that he couldn't support him. No, you lost the plot. Like, basically, Godbard was saying, you lost the plot, dude. Yeah, I thought that was great, but it's not like I wanted you to neglect everything because you don't understand what I'm doing. Talhand finally is acknowledging for himself, he's right. I did neglect a lot of things, and now I understand them. Talhand improved rapidly. The way that Godbard had smithed was burned into his mind's eye, and thanks to his life as an adventurer, he knew what made some weapons and equipment superior. Plus, absolute plus. Again, the whole idea, what Godbard was saying there is you don't understand how the process is made, so you can't support me. What Talhand has gained that none of these dwarves in this village will understand is what made them superior, and he could possibly use that. His mastery of magic was also a level above what it had been back in the village. Talhand's time adventuring had made him stronger. As he continued to work on his skills, dude, if they end up turning Talhand like some, like, Talhand dethrones the Ore God right here. Talhand dethrones the Ore God, walks up in there and dethrones him. Doubt it. As he continued to work on his skills, the Rue Quagmire mercenary band started asking after his wares. Thanks to his acquaintance with Rudius, the mercenary branch chief became his patron, allowing Talhand to set up his own forge in Milshin. But just as before, Talhand didn't know why he was doing all this. What was the point of an adventurer playing at blacksmith in his spare time? Good question. I mean, I'm getting built up right now. Like, I'm getting all super happy right now because I'm like, Talhand's getting into something. He's achieving something. It seems like he's liking something. He's going after something. He's building something in the wake of seeing everything in his life falling apart over and over again. I keep losing my spot. I keep losing my position. I don't have anything. Everybody else is building something. There's families. They're having families and they're building something up. Elise has a family. Rias has a family. Paul had a family. Where's my family? I'm getting worked up in the fact that he's building something, but still in his mind, he's going, what am I even doing, though? In the end, if it doesn't feel like you have purpose in building it, what does it matter? It was only when Ruius brought the whole family from Shariah to visit that it made sense. When he saw the son of Paul, of all people, on better than equal footing with the Latrias, all while raising children of his own, it came into focus. He had to go back to the village. He had unfinished business. That was why he was smithing. Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Nice one, Refugian. Nice one, Refugian. It's simply that he had a feeling deep inside, I want to go back home. Why am I smithing? Why am I learning smithing of all things? I know that if I'm not a smith, I know that if I don't know smithing, I can't connect to my hometown. Why am I learning smithing? Because I want to connect to my hometown. Cheesy, Refugian. Cheesy. After Ruius gave him the pieces of black stone, Talhan returned to his forge. For a long time, he had an idea what he'd make if he were able to craft stone like this. He thought through the theory. Once it had been no more than a dream, but now he had the experience he needed. First, he shattered Ruius' black stone with earth magic and a hammer. This he mixed with iron sand, then heated it and combined it in the forge. Because the normal heat of the furnace wouldn't be enough, he applied fire and wind magic to raise the temperature as high as it would go. Using the superheated powder, he made both the core of the blade and the metal that would form its outer skin. The ratio differed, but they were essentially the same materials. With the scales of a red dragon or the hard bones of a hydra, he could have forged a yet more formidable blade, but Talhan did not use these. If he had, all that effort would have been meaningless. Next, he thoroughly quenched and tempered the blade. I wonder if it's implying there that he's purposely wanting to use a material like this that can be reproduced easily, rather than a rare material, to make something special. He's saying the effort would be meaningless if I used those materials. I could have, and they would have been really strong and formidable, but it would have made it meaningless. He wants to make something strong and tempered and powerful by his technique, not the materials. Next, he thoroughly quenched and tempered the blade, then worked vigorously through the night, pouring into a steady flow of energy and mana. In the end, he was left with a single sword, its blade both strong and black. Although it had no special adornments or properties, Talhan was satisfied with his work. He crafted a scabbard for it, then wrapped it in cloth of fine wool and strapped it to his back. That done, he packed the remaining blocks of black stone into a bag and left Milshan. His destination was a dwarf village he hailed from. Yep, he wants to bring that back to them. Now here's the interesting thing. Again, he was doing blacksmithing for the purpose of eventually returning home. He didn't know why he was doing it, but then he eventually realized, oh, it's because I want to go back home. And the assumption there is that he wants to be able to go there and fit in to be able to make some sort of connection with them. But yes, the curious thing is, why is he making a blade? He wants something to present to them. But it does seem like he is sort of using this as an olive branch to go to see the ore god. He wants to see Godbard. He could have easily just taken the ore to him. Ruius gave him the ore, and it's obvious that he's going to use that as sort of a way of connecting them, and this is how he's going to have Ruius be able to communicate to them. But it almost feels like he's trying to use this as an opportunity to connect to him while helping Ruius. Ruius wants to communicate to them? Perfect opportunity. Making that stuff that you made back there. And I will make it into a weapon. 2 birds, 1 stone. I help Ruius make his connection, which he wants to help Ruius. And 2, I'll show what I can do. And this works together because what's the point in even bringing him these ingots, this material, if I can't prove that it's useful? I had to make it into something to show him. So he's probably going to go in there and go, look at this sword. Look how powerful it is. I made it. And the material? Ruius. 2 bird, 1 stone. That's where I feel it's going. It's almost like a series of coincidences. There's almost like a Destiny series of a coincidence moment happening right here. He had been away for a long time, but the village hadn't changed. Its stone-hewn buildings were set into the side of the cliff, and the sound from hammers on steel rang out from within the high stone walls that surrounded it. No one challenged Talhan at the gate, and he passed through. He was no longer one of them, but the dwarves didn't keep such tight security that they'd question an unfamiliar dwarf. Talhan saw a great hole in the cliff, where pulleys worked in constant motion. Men naked to the waist and dripping in sweat hauled out coal and iron ore, while women walked to the rest area in front of the mine with mountains of steamed sweet potatoes balanced on their shoulders. The scene filled him with nostalgia. Time hadn't changed them, even though it had turned most of them into strangers. He got a few curious looks as he walked around, but no icy stares. Either none of them knew him, or they'd all forgotten him. Either way, Talhan was unfazed. Yeah, I can assume this is a massive amount of time difference here. Massive time difference here. I don't think it actually says how long he's been gone, actually. He had only one destination, and he hurried there, the chief's house. But, of course, there were some who remembered him. One of his brothers stood before him, blocking his path. I guess I should start actually doing voices.
Harsh, large mountain summit. Haven't seen you in a large spell. What are you doing here?
One of his brothers stood before him, blocking his path. This man was one of those who had laughed at Talhan when they were children, and who had been chosen for the Ore-God's inner circle.
I came to see the Ore-God. Don't put on airs. He'll never stoop to seeing the likes of you.
Without a word, Talhan reached for the bundle on his back. He unwrapped the fine woolen cloth, then pulled the sword from its scabbard. The man gasped. The blade was jet black, so black that it absorbed every glimmer of light. Despite that, it didn't feel at all vile or sinister. If anything, it exuded pride and the freshness of a cool breeze. The beauty of it gave him chills.
What is that? I forged it. The hell you did.
For a dwarven smith, swords were everything. Great dwarves forged great swords. This could never be Talhan's work. Again, to these people, obviously, again, this is a guy that barely put something together back at that competition. He didn't even know what he was doing. He said that he's never even touched the tools for a while. He's never done this. He literally devoted himself to magic. Wind, water, wind, water.
It's an offering.
The title of Ore-God was regarded as another name for the world's greatest smith, and a source of pride for dwarven kind. When any smith in the world forged something they thought was exceptional, it was incumbent upon the Ore-God to view it. Interesting. Again, there's a third one. I'm building the third one. Refugian cooking. There's 3. Rudius needs to see him. I want to see him. I have to craft something, so this will help it be viewed. And in order to show that the ore is good enough that the Ore-God would want to work with Rudius, I'll make the sword. But this is technically the 2 together. In order to show it, I had to make it because it's incumbent upon him to view it. This is my way in. I had to make something. Cool. Though any submissions first passed under the expert eyes of another dwarf, who turned away anything subpar. The man who stood in front of Talhan now was that dwarf. He held no love for Talhan, but swords told the truth. Of any person that I'm going to bring this to that will vouch for me is the person who used to laugh in my face. The black blade had no adornments, nor did it utilize any shortcuts. It was probably immensely hard, and not a blade that could be easily broken. It was, in short, a masterwork. No dwarf could lie in the face of such a blade. Again, we're not talking about much time here. It said that Talhan went up there and seen the grave. And I think it also implies that Geese was still around. So I think that the time in which he separated from Rudius and decided to become a blacksmith, Geese was still around. So I'm assuming this is post volume 22 that he starts getting into blacksmithing. We're probably only talking 5 years here. I'm going to assume 5 years. He made something this good. I'm kind of curious how old he was when he left the village. To show that difference in how fast he mastered this art, why I'm sticking on this is because it's one of those elements that shows you if he sticks with this, he can topple the Ore-God. I believe he could. That's incredible to get that good that fast. To have something exceptional enough to be allowed to see the Ore-God.
I will permit it. You may pass. Talhan of the harsh, large mountain summit.
Respect. That they can put aside their own pride to allow that. Again, this is a guy that was laughing at Talhan. Talhan said, here, look at this. And he got immediate respect to go, putting aside that I used to laugh at this guy, putting aside that I don't want to believe that he is better than me, this is too good. Go. It seems like these dwarves, or at least this person, but I would assume these dwarves will put that above everything. There could be an element that if he chooses his own pride to dismiss Talhan, and somebody else finds out what Talhan made, it would probably look bad upon him.
I thank you, daughter of the flaming blade still.
Talhan replied, finding the name of his brother of old in his memory. With a bow, he returned the sword to its scabbard, wrapped it up in the woolen cloth, and put it once more on his back. He was stopped several more times like this before he reached the Ore-god, but the sword always earned him passage. The Ore-god, godbird of the proud heavenly peak, looked a little older than Talhan remembered. That was no surprise. Many moons had passed since Talhan left the village.
You've gotten old, Talhan. I could say the same to you. I thought you died of this long ago. It wasn't luck for trying.
They love the whole dying in the ditch thing. They exchanged only brief greetings. At Godbird's side sat his wife and his inner circle. They didn't conceal their alarm at seeing the village's greatest eccentric back after all this time, but there was no crackle of tension between Talhan and Godbard. Good. Good. I don't think Godbard hated Talhan. Again, I think there was an element of just seeing that Talhan did not have the talent he needed to be there. Talhan, you have to fix that. That's not Godbard's responsibility. There's that expectation of responsibility there, that feeling of betrayal, but you chose to do that, and you failed, unfortunately, to meet all the standards needed. As Talhan faced Godbard, his heart was at peace. Neither of them spoke. Talhan might have been calm, but he had no intention of talking to Godbard. There was plenty he might have said, the things he had seen, the experience he had had outside the village, but there was no need for words. Instead, he silently held out the sword to Godbard, who took it, and just as wordlessly, slid it from its scabbard to look at the blade.
Oh my.
No sooner had Godbard laid his eyes on it, than he let out a sigh of admiration. He raised the black blade up into the light to appraise it.
A fine blade, full of conviction. There's nothing uncertain or half-hearted in its make, but your inexperience shows in every part. A blade I forged with the same materials and methods would be far superior.
Interesting. Despite the fact that everybody saw value and greatness in it, enough to allow him to see the Ore-god. Again, everybody has to approve of it before he can go before the Ore-god. For the Ore-god, it's inexperienced. I could make something far superior. So despite my, holy crap, if he can reach the levels of the Ore-god, he's going to take over this place because he did that within 5 years. Nope. Still not enough. There's a reason he's the Ore-god, Andrew. At this, Talhan smiled faintly, naturally. No matter how much work he had put into forging and smithing over the past few years, the idea that he could match the Ore-god, who had been honing his skills for over a century, was laughable. Over a century. Okay. There's the signification there about how long he's been gone, how long Talhan has been gone, or at least, again, we don't know how long until he left the village. He could have been there for 98 years, and then at the 150-year mark, Talhan comes back right here. Talhan knew that well. He chuckled.
Something funny.
The thing was, that wasn't the point to Talhan.
Would you like to know what those materials and methods are? I am curious. It is a strange sword.
It was normal for a smith to tell the Ore-god the materials and methods in which they had forged their offerings. Interesting. I might be reading too much in this, but it feels like an element of Talhan liking the fact that he doesn't know how I made it. It's a proof that I did something outside of methods that he understands. I know something he doesn't. Though it is mentioning the idea that it's normal for them to mention the methods in which they forge them. The reason they offered the swords to him was so that the techniques would pass on to the future generations. Yeah, he's sort of like this database. Everybody brings it to him, and he chooses what is good or not good to pass on to the next generation. Somebody comes forward to him and says, yeah, I made this way. Well, that's... Yes, we're not using that. We're not using that. Nope. Everybody thought it was impressive, but this isn't good. Or this is better that you don't know about. That's a cool system. I'm loving... Again, this is stuff that I love. I love seeing the inner workings of every culture within this world. Again, I want to know about the halflings. I want to know more about the Adolians. The elves. I mean, we get a little bit with Ellis, but I want to know about the elves. I want to know about all these cultures. It's so cool. I loved getting into Sapertians, and every bit with them was just give it. The little bit that we got of the ogres was cool. Love it. The cultures of the dwarves is super fascinating. There were many who wished to leave a record of what metals that they had used, their processes, and their tweaks and improvements for posterity.
I made it from rods of stone created from earth magic. With magic, I turned them into powder, which I mixed with iron sand. With fire and wind magic, I stoked the forge to a temperature hot enough to melt the powder. After that, I hammered it out and quenched it the usual way. I cooled it with water magic, stone made with earth magic.
Again, This is odd to him. We use earth magic to break up things. You're using stone made with earth magic. That's odd. These words caught Godbard's notice, and he suddenly recalled why. The process was one that he had heard of before. The crackpot dwarf in front of him had told him about it many times when he was young. The previous Orgod and the elf. Talhan didn't make this up from before. When he first went to Sot do this with Rudius and making that sword, he heard about this before. He didn't make this up.
This is your revenge, then? I only wanted to settle something between us. Did you think that when I saw this sword, I'd tell you to return? Nay, but you said what I wanted to hear, and that's enough for me.
Godbard had said that he could forge a far superior sword, and that alone had satisfied Talhan. It was as if the feelings that had festered in his heart since he was a child had been excised. Oh yes, if he had used the same materials and method, Godbard would undoubtedly produce a far finer blade. I was thinking for a minute there I was going to actually try to figure out what those words were. That makes perfect sense. I was training myself to be at your side to do this method. You rejected me, but now that I'm here to show you that method, you're telling me I could make something far more superior. I could use that method that we could have done together. But again, fully acknowledging this is a new Talhan, one that now knows how this stuff is made. Talhan was lacking something to do this. Talhan found that, but at least now he's getting closure because Godbard is accepting that method that he originally wanted to create. This is a completion of what Talhan was seeking out back there after Talhan himself improved. Again, don't mistake that. Talhan had to improve, but now he at least sees that that's what he was building for and he achieved it. That's all it is. I achieved what I was seeking out to do back there. Godbard would undoubtedly produce a far finer blade, but without magic, he couldn't crush the stone. And the heated iron could not be fully cooled by water alone. Indeed, without a magician with the requisite skills, he'd be lost. That being said, a genius smith like Godbard could probably find a clever way to work the stone without using Talhan's methods. Again, he's giving them the process, it's just magic makes it easier. But at least he's kind of showing, you need me. And I don't even think Talhan's staying here. I really don't feel Talhan staying here. Again, because it's mentioning the idea that's all he wanted to really hear. It gives a feel that I got what I wanted. Peace out. I got closure. I'm not staying here. I don't really have a connection here. I'm good. Just like Ghislaine. Ghislaine wasn't staying there. We knew she wasn't staying there. It's just a closure for their life. It's enough for him to just at least know, you need me for this, and you think it's incredible. You could do a better job, but I'm not staying. I got my closure. And again, Talhan acknowledges he's going to find another way, though. He'll fill in the gaps with something else. Or he'll find a magician.
And this stone, can you make it, Talhan? Nay, it was made by my friend's son.
He took 3 pieces of stone from the bag and placed them in front of Godbard. When Godbard reached out to pick one of them up, his eyes widened at the weight. He tried to split it to get a good look at the cross-sections, but couldn't, and he was no more successful of trying to smash it with a hammer. The hardness and toughness of the material astounded him. Again, you gotta heat it. Again, this is the whole idea of it was created with earth magic. Dwarves are used to breaking up earth with earth magic, not creating steel with it, not creating stone with it. And so when you're thinking, okay, earth magic made this, oh, I'll shatter it easy. Wait. I actually have to heat this up, burn it in sand and all that stuff, that long process that he explained it to me. This is some good This is the good stuff. Give me this stuff. Again, materials brought to him, offerings brought to him, doesn't really impress him. But Rudius knows how to sort of form the stone with earth magic to reinforce it and make it strong. It's not simply making a rock that has pores and whatnot and that makes it fragile. He can make it solid. Just like whenever he makes his figurines and whatnot. He's creating a process and a stitching and whatnot within it that makes it more sturdy. Talhan could see a desire bubble up within him to use it. A smile tugged at Godbard's mouth. Talhan saw it and nodded, pleased. Godbard's expression hadn't changed since they were children. He had no trouble reading his face.
In a few days, he will come to present himself to you.
Godbard was silent. With Rudius' face in his mind's eye, Talhan asked softly,
Would you meet with him?
he had already achieved what he set out to do. He had heard the words he had hoped to hear from the person he wanted to say them. Now, he just had to repay the man who had made it possible. Rudeus gave him the material he needed to do this. Gotta repay him. And it's so funny from Rudeus' perspective, Talhan's doing him a lot of favor right now. To Rudeus, Talhan's going out of his way to go see his hometown and help him get a meeting with Orgod. But for Talhan, Rudeus is doing him a massive favor right now.
I'll admit that he doesn't look too dependable, and you can be sure that he'll have some beastly request that isn't worth the trouble. But even so, he's got guts. You won't regret meeting with him. I'll swear on that sword.
Godbard looked to the sword, to the stones, and back. His wife and advisors at his side were holding their own opinions, but Godbard didn't plan on asking them. Talhan was barely recognizable as the man that he had been. Godbard suspected that this magician who created this stone had been involved. His curiosity was piqued. Interesting, from Godbard's perspective, Talhan's so different. It's gotta be this boy. It's gotta be this magician that made this, that Talhan then used to do something great. Which is true. Partially, again, a lot of the change in Talhan is through seeing everybody and how their life has moved forward. And Rudeus is technically a part of that.
Very well. What's his name? Rudeus Greyrat. I see.
Commit that name to memory. Godbard nodded. With that, Talhan rose to his feet. It was only a verbal agreement, but that satisfied him. Yeah, for this culture, I can see a verbal agreement being fine. Again, this isn't a human environment. Godbard wasn't one to break promises. Talhan had once felt as though he had. Here we're finally getting into it. Like the thing that we started this chapter off, we're finally getting into it right here. But there had been no promises between them to break. Talhan had been experienced and overreaching. That was all. Thank you so much. I love when I see something and the character is able to accept it. It seemed obvious at the beginning. This is the thing that I love to do. I love to always think from both sides. It's hard because, again, at the beginning there, it seems like Godbard is an absolute hole. Absolute right there. But I wanted to acknowledge that it never told me that Godbard ever accepted that's what he's going to do. It never said Godbard then agreed, yes, I need you at my side to do exactly what the elf did. He's just saying, oh, what you're doing there? Don't listen to them. Yeah, cool. He doesn't know what all Talhan's doing. He doesn't know that Talhan's going to be, neglecting everything else. I was assuming there was no actual promise made there. That's what they're doing. And then Talhan accepts it. He once felt that he broke a promise. He's never broke a promise. I thought he once did, but we never made a promise. I was inexperienced. I overreached. I went up on that podium and said, no, Godbard, I'm supposed to be at your side. I'm making the water and wind magic. You can't help me. You neglected everything else. I love seeing the other side because sometimes you miss that nothing was really established there. You made an assumption. Talhan in that moment, right at the beginning of this chapter, made an assumption and it was his own fault. And he's able to accept that. And I think that gives him massive amounts of clarity right here. I chose to do that. I messed up. I neglected things. Godbard didn't. Godbard's not the boogeyman. This village isn't the boogeyman. Yes, they're stuck in their ways, but they're not the boogeyman.
Are you leaving? Oi! No one will object to your presence here. I have my own forge in Milson. I mean to stay there for the rest of my days.
I knew he wasn't going to stay. Just knew he wasn't going to stay. They never stay. They get their clarity. They move on. I've established something elsewhere. I'm good there. And I think there might be an element that he doesn't want to stay in Godbard's shadow. I don't want to stay here because I'll stay in your shadow. I have something built over here. I'm enjoying that stuff. I'm good. Sucks. He's going to become Cliff's new order of knights. He's going to be the actual official smith for Cliff's new order of knights. But I love that Godbard asks him to stay. No one will object to your presence here. And yes, the sad state is there is an element there that they're only going to accept him now because he's good now. But again, Talhan acknowledges that's his fault. I chose to neglect my actual study and smithing and crafting. That's why I was the oddball. They laughed at me because I was an oddball. I was acting like I can be at the side of a smith when I don't even understand smithing. But now that he does, no one's going to object to you being here. You've made something incredible. You made something different. The method is unique. With that, he left the house of the Ore God. At some point, his former siblings had gathered outside. Their gazes were hard, and some didn't bother to hide their scorn. Never mind. Never mind. Never mind. Only Godbirds accepting him. Only the people around him seem to accept him. Talhan will accept you, don't worry. Nah, I'm going back home. Walks out the door. Confirmation. Scorn.
If you'll excuse me.
As Talhan started walking, they parted to clear his path. Looks of confusion and contempt followed him on his way out of the village. Okay, correction here. The looks of scorn here that they're not hiding could be the fact that he's denying the Ore God. No one will object your presence here. Are you leaving? Yeah, I'm out of here. I'm going to Milshin. Could be. No one spoke to him. No one came after him. Yet Talhan walked with a spring in his step. His heart as clear as a cloudless sky. At last, his curse had been lifted. 1 month later, the Ore God would agree to an alliance with the Dragon God in exchange for a large supply of Stark Stone. God, I don't care about that last part. I just like the fact that his curse has been lifted after so many freaking volumes after we found out that Talhan pretty much left his village and doesn't want to go back. That was good. That was good. That actually turned into some good stuff there. Again, I love seeing into the different cultures of the different races. I hope, again, we get one for halflings. I hope we get one for the elves. Some more demon races. I'm always going to eat that stuff up. I love this, dude. This is some good. But yeah, I just love getting Talhan's story finally, a closure to it. It's sad that it took all the way until a side chapter in Redundancy where we finally even touched him at all. But I love it. Thank you, Refugin. This was fantastic. Fantastic. And a fantastic way to loop in the Ore God finally. Because again, we talked about the Ore God before. And it's a clever way to loop in Talhan's story with it. I get enough to know about who the Ore God is, what their significance is. At the same time, get a closure for Talhan's story. Good dude. Good but yeah, 1 month later, getting to that alliance set up. Kind of foreseen that. Seeing the Ore, wanting some of it. Now Rudius has to still make Dark Stone. Rudius has to make stone for him in order to make an alliance. Crap, I gotta make more stone. I forgot. Damn it. We're gonna call it there, chat. I know. Only 2 chapters. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoyed learning more about Talhan and the dwarves like I did. I eat this shit up. But anyways, that said, that's good though. That's actually good though, because technically next chapter we go into a new storyline, which is, again, Geno Brits. We're going to be going into the Sword Sanctum, Geno Brits, and I think the next few chapters go together. They feel like they probably go together. I haven't read past the first chapter, or at least broke it down. Yeah, it actually looks like the next 4 chapters are all technically together, but we'll see. We'll see as usual. I know the first chapter alone is going to be like some good eatins, because again, I've always wanted to know more about Geno Brits, so it's going to be cool to get in that stuff. But anyways, that aside, chat, hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. As always, if you did, again, before you leave, hit the like button down below. I greatly appreciate your guys' support, your kind words for dropping by for this Mushoku Monday premiere. It's so fantastic to kind of talk to you guys in the chat and everything. It makes my week. Every single week, it makes my week. But I hope you guys enjoyed, as always. Again, as usual, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships. Everybody that hits some super chats in there, all that stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's you guys that keep the lights on, keeps us going. But yes, until the next Mushoku Monday, y'all take care. I wonder if it's implying there the idea that he wants to show that he can craft something magnificent without rare materials. He was a rascal, easy to read, and constantly getting up to antics that made Talhan want to put his head in between his legs. Oops. Oops. That's one that I don't want to put in the outtakes, but I'm totally putting the outtakes. So there you go. Everybody that waits for the outtakes, you got it. I'm reading about Talhan and I couldn't help but my brain assumed as I'm reading that, Talhan wanted to put his head between his legs. It might be because Ellen Lise lived It might be. It might be because. 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 Why do I keep saying?
This is one of those moments where there's too many characters and it's so difficult to find out who's actually talking at what time. He'll specify who's all in a situation, but it doesn't say who's saying things at particular times.